this country by the current president that this is legitimate policy to assassinate American citizens. No charges made, no trial. The president himself becomes the prosecutor, he becomes the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Because yeah, there are, I'm sure there are bad people. This Alaki obviously was fomenting crimes and violence, although he was never charged with a crime. But he was deemed a very dangerous person, so he was targeted. And he was killed. He was the first American that openly was targeted by our government and was assassinated, along with a bystander. Another American citizen was killed. But that wasn't enough. Our government said no. They thought that his son was also much involved. So therefore, a week or so later, they sent another cruise missile drone attack, and they, bombed and killed his son, Alaki's son. But then when they found out, they don't talk about this case, because when they found out about it, the kid was 16 years old, and he was in the backyard barbecuing with a friend of his. But he was never charged. But people say, well, there's still just a couple. Still a couple, don't worry about it. These are bad people. But what we must worry about is the rule of law, because the rule of law protects us and more, and that has to be protected. Our economy needs a lot of adjustment. We've talked a lot about monetary policy, and we got into this trouble because of the financial bubbles created by our Federal Reserve System. I do not believe we can get out of this mess without understanding how the business cycle works. The business cycle works merely by the federal government coming in through the combination of congressional law and the Federal Reserve. They create excessive money, drive interest rates down. The message you get from low interest rates is that there's a lot of savings, and then businessmen overinvest, build too many houses, prices go up too high in certain areas, bubbles form. So the reason we're in a deep recession, depression at the moment is because we had a huge financial bubble that was patched together over these last 40 years, and it finally met the point of no return. Now, what have been the tools when there's an attempt of the market to correct things? The government has always resorted to spending more money and printing more money. And it tended to help over these years, but now it doesn't help anymore. How can you lower our interest rates? They're below zero right now. They can't get much lower than that. How can they increase spending when there is no money? And our deficit this year is $1.5 trillion. That cannot solve the problem. When there are mistakes, when there's overinvestment, when prices go up too high, this has to be liquidated. We would have done much better if in 2008 the government would have just stepped back, and then would not have bailed out the rich bankers and the corporations. We would have been better off. Warned that there would be a great danger, and there was fear built up, and they said if we don't bail out the system, there would be a depression. Well, guess where the depression would have been? It would have been on those who were receiving our money. Instead, the depression was delivered to the people, the middle class. They lost their jobs and they lost their houses, and we, the taxpayer, absorbed the debt. The bad debt was transferred from the illiquid operations of the banks and the mortgage companies and delivered to the Treasury as well as the Federal Reserve. So it's just a transfer. This is just prolonging the agony. This is what Japan had done for 20 years. This is what we did in the Depression. The main reason that they keep doing this is because the ideas that have infiltrated Washington for many decades have been driven by Keynesian economics. We have to repeal Keynesian economics and introduce free market economics. Those of us who have advocated this position say, well, they don't understand because you can't have inflation. If you increase the money supply in a weak economy, that won't cause inflation. Well, the only thing they forget about is that you can have stagflation and you can have inflationary depressions, because once you print a lot of money, you devalue the currency. And that is what we're doing. You can't get out of this trouble by just printing the money and trying to maintain a system that is not viable. What has happened to us is we've lost our confidence that a free society actually works, that free market works, that we have lost the confidence that property is supposed to be owned by the people and not controlled by the government. Our property really isn't our own. We pay huge taxes and we have to ask a lot of permission before we can use our land, and sometimes we can't use it because we can't get around all the regulations. But this isn't a partisan issue. You know, when we got into some trouble 10 years ago approximately, when Enron failed and Republicans were in charge, they said, well, there weren't enough regulations. So what they did was they passed Sarbanes-Oxley. It is estimated now, and by the way, there were a total of 3 of us that voted against that. That's how uniform the whole system was, more regulations as a solution. But it is estimated now that Sarbanes-Oxley has cost this economy $1 trillion in these past 10 years. It is also estimated that Dodd-Frank, the new regulatory bill that's been there a year, it has cost or will cost $1 trillion as well. And then there's this other little item thrown out at us to further undermine our liberties and our freedom of choice is the Obama medical care program. That's another huge monster. So whether it's medical care or education or housing, when governments get involved, they print the money, they create inflation in those areas. When you increase the money supply, all prices and all labor prices do not go up evenly. They go up unevenly. So what have we done for education and housing and etc.? We want, those who are motivated, many with good intentions, and they say, well, we want to help the people who can't afford it and make sure they get an education. So what have we done? We illegally, in the federal government, because there's no authority in the federal government to be involved in education, they take over education, create a department like a Department of Education, which we should abolish. So we pump a lot of money into the educational system. Did the quality of education go up? No. Did the price of education go up? Skyrocketing. So what happens? We have a lot more graduates graduating with poor education, not well trained, and no jobs. And now, students getting out of college right now owe more money than all our credit cards. That's how big it is. So the system fails. This whole program of giving everybody a house, that failed. They're ended up losing their houses. And in medicine, it's the same thing. They pump a lot of money into medicine. They take away our right of freedom of choice, and we end up with high cost of medicine and quality of medicine going down. But there's a lot of special interests that control these programs. For instance, in medicine, whether the Republicans are passing a bill or the Democrats are passing the bill, guess who line up as the lobbyists? Drug companies and insurance companies, and they're the ones who help write these bills. And this is the reason your cost of medicine continues to go up. But what else do they do? What else does the drug company do to interfere with your freedom of choice? Because right now, your freedom of choice of looking at alternative medical programs and medical care and nutritional product is always being curtailed because of the drug companies. We should make sure that everybody has free choices in all that they do, and make sure that you have a freedom of choice in your medical products as well.